面粉一样的，用手就可以抠得掉。
就像那个面粉一样。
In the city of Changsha, an alarming secret has been uncovered, one that could topple entire apartment towers. It all began when a homeowner decided to renovate, only to stumble upon something chilling. A main structural beam, the very spine of the building, had been cut open from the inside. The steel bars meant to bear the weight of the tower were sliced clean through. The revelation left the community stunned. These weren't bargain homes. Residents had poured 3 to 4 million yuan, nearly $500,000 US, into what they believed were luxury apartments. Instead, they discovered they were living inside a catastrophe waiting to happen. As word spread through the residents' chat group, the nightmare grew darker. It wasn't a single unit. It wasn't even one tower. Across the entire complex, the same horror appeared. Out of 132 homes, 96 had critical beams cut apart. The skeleton of the buildings was mutilated, leaving families trapped in places that could collapse without warning. And while fear grew, local authorities brushed off the warning signs. What should have been a dream residence had become uninhabitable. The developer behind this nightmare? A state-owned giant. But rather than fixing the danger, their response was to silence the outrage. A Douyin video posted by a woman known as Xinxin's mom went viral, exposing how banners of protest were torn down overnight, while the expensive security system residents paid for remained conveniently blind. Then came a cruel twist. Elevators in all 3 towers were abruptly shut down for so-called maintenance, forcing residents, from children to the elderly, to climb dozens of floors in suffocating summer heat. To the residents, it was absurd. To netizens, it was outright criminal. And to one devastated homeowner, it was too much to bear. He ended his life in despair. So the question hangs in the air. How could such a disaster unfold in modern China? And why does no one face justice? Residents were led to believe officials were taking action. They were told the case was passed to the Chamber of Commerce. In reality, nothing changed. Later, a testing team from Hunan University, led by Professor Chen Dachuan, issued their so-called expert opinion. They claimed the damaged beams were only secondary beams and boldly promised the buildings wouldn't fall. But in the same breath, they admitted those beams still carried nearly a third of the tower's weight. Their proposed solution? Patch them up later. Yet Xinhua reported something far worse. Every inspected apartment showed beam damage. Over 90% had exposed steel bars, stirrups cut away, or so little rebar left that the beams could no longer support their loads. The local housing bureau then gave a laughable excuse that kitchen doors had been the wrong size. Instead of redesigning, builders simply carved into load-bearing beams to make the doors fit. And still, they insisted secondary beams were not a serious issue. The developer Changsha Runyu Real Estate quickly pushed out a statement boasting of a special task force to work with authorities. But homeowners refused to buy into the charade. They demanded national-level independent inspections, rejecting both the developer and the local bureau that had ignored their pleas for months. Online, anger erupted. Sarcasm filled the comments. One netizen wrote, "If the experts are so sure these buildings won't collapse, let them move in first." Another snapped, "The acceptance process is nothing but a show." Construction workers who chimed in were even harsher. "You can't fix this. Once the beams are destroyed, the entire structure is compromised." Another warned, "The foundation alone costs over 100,000 yen to resist earthquakes. If the beams are cut, everything above will eventually fall. The leaks prove it already." And then the warnings became reality. Xinxin's mom posted another video, this time showing her bathroom toilet leaking. Soon after, footage appeared of hallways flooding, broken elevators, and water gushing everywhere. The disaster was no longer just theory, it was happening in real time. Through tears, a woman known online as Xinxin's mom spoke out in a viral video. "Our family bought this apartment with so much hope. We dreamed of celebrating the Lunar New Year here with both sides of our family, but everything was shattered by this ruthless fraud. Her words struck a nerve across China. For many, the nightmare of these dream homes was a painful reminder of a disaster that had already scarred Changsha just a few years ago. On April 29, 2022, in Wangcheng district, an 8-story self-built apartment block suddenly crumbled into a mountain of rubble. The building was originally approved for 5 floors, but had been recklessly expanded to 8 without any clearance. Within seconds, it collapsed like a sandcastle in the rain. The toll was devastating. 54 people lost their lives, 9 were injured, and just 10 survivors were pulled from the debris after days of desperate digging. One young woman was found alive only after 131 hours, buried beneath the ruins. The cause? A lethal cocktail of greed and negligence. Developers had illegally stacked more floors onto a weak foundation, ignoring basic safety standards. Heavy rains weakened it further. Warnings were visible, yet officials looked the other way. To make things worse, the unsafe structure was even used for businesses. The investigation later confirmed what everyone already knew. Unlawful construction was to blame. The owner and several unqualified designers were sentenced to prison, while 62 government officials faced punishment for dereliction of duty. The economic damage was estimated at 90 million yuan, roughly $13.5 million US dollars. Now, residents in Changsha fear history is repeating, not because of natural disaster, but because of the same toxic mix of greed and incompetence. The scandal over cut beams is not a one-off. It's part of a much larger pattern of chaos in China's construction industry. In April 2025, another viral video exposed a country garden project where strong winds ripped an entire piece of the exterior wall straight off the building. Country garden, controlled by the Yang family, has long been promoted as one of China's national champions, especially in smaller cities. But behind the glossy ads lies a bleak reality. Over the past year alone, complaints have poured in. Walls collapsing during storms, elevator shafts turning into waterfalls during heavy rains, and structural beams corroding within just 2 years of people moving in. And this isn't the worst of it. In Shenzhen in 2023, thousands of residents were evacuated overnight after deep cracks and sinking foundations turned their high-rises into death traps. In Jiangsu in November 2022, one man who had spent years paying off his country garden home without ever receiving a legal property deed jumped to his death from the very apartment he had longed to own. But country garden is only one name on a long list. Across the nation, millions of Chinese families are deceived by glossy brochures, 3D renderings, and promises of dream homes. What they receive instead are Tofu-Dreg projects, unsafe, hollow, and often deadly. The places meant to be safe havens turn into cages of fear and betrayal. Think about it. Families pour in life savings, borrow from relatives, and gamble their futures on a roof over their heads. Yet what they get are ticking time bombs. Apartments where walls can crack open, beams can buckle, and collapse could come any day. The cruelest betrayal? The government. Instead of standing with its citizens, officials repeat the same rehearsed lines. These compromised structures are safe. For many, that lie cuts deeper than the broken beams. Experts have been warning for years. The truth is simple. Beams and columns are not decoration. They are the bones of a building. They carry the loads, transfer forces, and hold everything up. Once they're cut, the entire skeleton is compromised. A 2024 study by Gala et al. Proved that defective reinforced concrete beams, those missing stirrups or lacking proper steel, lose their strength quickly. Cracks appear earlier, stress builds up faster, and failure happens without warning. In other words, beams with missing steel aren't just weak, they're lethal. The Structure Center explained it even more clearly. Beams are designed to resist bending, slabs span the loads, and columns hold vertical and lateral forces, but their strength depends on their full cross-section. Remove even a small portion of that steel or concrete, and the capacity plummets. Every careless cut leaves the building weaker. This isn't cosmetic damage. It's an open invitation to collapse. And in the end, it's ordinary families who are forced to carry the burden. People who place their trust in developers, and believed government oversight would protect them now find themselves abandoned. Every morning they wake up inside apartments that could crumble without warning, left helpless by the very system that was supposed to guarantee their safety. This is the brutal truth of China's housing nightmare. Promises shattered, empty assurances repeated, and millions of citizens trapped in buildings that feel more like ticking bombs than homes. What should have been the proud dream of ownership has transformed into a desperate fight to stay alive. All across the country, these so-called Tofu-Dreg projects are spreading like an invisible epidemic. Cut beams, leaking pipes, collapsing walls, sinking foundations. What once looked like isolated accidents now reveals a terrifying nationwide pattern of greed and neglect. Each scandal erodes public trust further, leaving homeowners paralyzed with fear inside places that could collapse at any time. The financial devastation is staggering. Life savings erased, families drowning in debt, and property values sinking like stones. But the deeper wound is not measured in money. It's the destruction of hope, broken futures, shattered families, and a generation stripped of any sense of security. As long as developers chase profit at any cost and officials continue to turn their backs, these architectural time bombs will keep multiplying. The real question is no longer if another tragedy will happen, only how soon.